Welcome, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. Can you? Yes. Otherwise, you would complain. For those who don't know me, my name is Sabine Eckmann, and I'm the director and chief curator here at the Kemper Art Museum. My task today is to just welcome all of you, and it's really a pleasure to do so and to celebrate together with you the opening of Seeds, Containers of a World to Come, and also to do this together with some of the artists that are featured in the exhibition. I'm very glad that Carolina Caycedo, Juan Chávez, Ellie Irons, and Anne Percoco could join us today. All the artists in the exhibition share an abiding interest in seeds, which serves actually as a tie, one could say, for a very diverse array of artworks on view in the show. The exhibition is actually the second in a loose series that focus on the environmental crisis and its devastating effects on humanity. Of course, we cannot turn the clock back and we cannot turn it forward, but we can contemplate in imaginative ways, symbolically, metaphorically, and aesthetically, the conundrum associated with the so-called natural environment. Before I turn this over to Meredith Malone, who will introduce the exhibition and its conceptual framework, I would like to thank all of our supporters. The exhibition is made possible by the leadership support of the William T. Kemper Foundation. All exhibitions at the Kemper Art Museum are supported by members of the Director's Circle, with major annual support provided by Emily and Teddy Greenspan, and additional generous annual support from Deborah Beckman and Jacob Kotzebue, Michael Foreman and Jennifer Rice, Julie Kemper-Foyer, Joanne Golden, Andrew Stern, David and Dorothy Kemper, Ron and Pamela Mass, and Kim and Bruce Olson. Further support for this exhibition was provided by the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts, the Missouri Arts Council, a state agency, the Hortense Lewin Art Fund, the Ken and Nancy Kranzberg Fund, and finally members of the Mildred Lang Kemper Art Museum like you are. Before I congratulate both curators, Meredith Malone and Svea Braeunert here, I also want to extend my thank you to the Sam Fox School, and in particular to Carmen Colangelo. Thanks, Carmen, for supporting us in this exhibition. So before I turn it over and let Meredith talk, let me start by introducing her a little bit to you for those who don't know her. She's curator here at the museum and responsible for post-war and contemporary art. In this role, she has organized, curated, and co-curated a myriad of exhibitions, including Thomas Saraceno, Cloud Specific, Cosima von Bonin, Character Appropriation, To See Without Being Seen, Contemporary Art in Drone Warfare, Nicole Miller, A Sound, A Signal, The Circus, Multiplied, Edition Matte, and the Transformable Work of Art, and Chance Aesthetics as well. You might all remember that, the wonderful Adam Pendleton monographic exhibition a year ago. Due to her are also several permanent and temporary commissions, including Cosmic Filaments by Thomas Saraceno in the atrium of the museum, and Christine Sun Kim, Stacking Traumas. Meredith also continues and has proposed and facilitated acquisitions for the museum by such artists as Armand Turquoise Dyson, Marcel Duchamp, Nicole Eisenman, Andrea Fraser, Chitra Ganesh, Rashid Johnson, Adam Pendleton, Man Ray, Martha Rosler, Rose B. Simpson, and many more. So you see, she doesn't only have time to do exhibitions. We ask her also to do other things. And I'm also very glad that this exhibition and the concept of the exhibition was already introduced a week ago. I think it was, not even, at the College Art Association with a panel that united curators and scholars to discuss art that relates in one way or the other to the crisis, to the current crisis, and that's already an older crisis of the environment. In any case, it's time to turn this over to Meredith. I know it's yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabina. So as you've already nicely put it, I'm Meredith Malone. I'm a curator here at the Kemper Art Museum, and it's really a pleasure to welcome you all here tonight for the opening of our exhibition. I had the pleasure of co-curating this group exhibition with Svea Braeunert, who is a research associate of design at the University of Applied Sciences in Potsdam, Germany. She will be the moderator for tonight's panel discussion. We're joined by 4 participating artists, Carolina Caycedo, Juan William Chávez, Ellie Irons, and Anne Percoco, each of whom created new work for the exhibition. But before introducing them, I just wanted to say a few words about the exhibition and some of the key concepts behind it. So, Seeds, Containers of a World to Come brings into dialogue work by 10 international artists whose research-based practices are defined by sustained inquiry into plant-human-land relations. The seed is the kernel, both literally and metaphorically, for their artistic investigations into issues of fragility, preservation, and possibility in the face of the global climate crisis. The artists in the exhibition work with and from a multiplicity of geographical and cultural contexts, both local and global, creating captivating sculptures, films, installations, and paintings that range from abstract to speculative to documentary. Each of the works on view suggests the seed as a timely means to address existential matters. Seeds are the first link in the food chain, the embodiment of biological diversity and cultural heritage, and the repository of life's future evolution. Cultivated by humans for millennia, seed varieties carry with them local histories, as well as narratives of migration and survival, bridging cultures, territories, and time periods. The diversity of seeds and the associated ecological relations are at risk due in part to the development of high-yield crops and monocultures since the mid-20th century. The loss of seed varieties is symptomatic of broader developments in the Anthropocene, the name given to our current period during which human activity has been the dominant influence on the environment. The exhibition is part of, as Sabina had mentioned, an ongoing efforts by the museum to consider our rapidly changing environment through the lens of visual art. Many of the works share an anti-colonial perspective, critical of extractive capitalism, calling for more expansive ideas of being in the world that are anchored in reciprocity and care. Arranged in an open floor plan, if you haven't seen the exhibition, though, you will have a chance to see it right after this. It is arranged in an open floor plan, and the show invites viewers to draw connections across artworks, engaging with a confluence of materials, form, contexts, and ideas. Through the works on view, we travel from community gardens to global seed storage vaults. We engage indigenous knowledge systems and plant cultivation technologies, and we celebrate feminist care practices. Each of the artists joining us this evening approached the seed from a position of curiosity and respect, asking what we might learn from the forms and actions of seeds, including their practices of cohabitation, entanglement, and survival under challenging conditions. With these commissions, Svea and I wanted to draw attention to the local context of St. Louis, recognizing the importance of situatedness as a prerequisite for avoiding detachment in the face of environmental crisis, while also emphasizing the necessary alignment of local and global views beyond borders when addressing climate change. Tonight, our panelists will each speak for a few minutes about their work in the show and how it relates to their broader artistic practices and core themes running throughout the exhibition. Svea will then moderate a discussion. There will be time at the end for questions with the audience, but following the discussion, I'd like to invite you all to join us across the plaza back at the Kemper to experience the exhibition together. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists. Carolina Caycedo is a multidisciplinary artist who draws on approaches from environmental justice, decolonization, ancestral knowledge, and feminism. Her practice honors the work of land and water protectors who have safeguarded and regenerated the biodiversity of their territories. Carolina holds a BFA from Los Andes University and an MFA from the Roski School of Art and Design at the University of Southern California, and she lives and works in Los Angeles. Juan William Chávez is an artist and cultural activist who collaborates on social practice art projects related to community building, food, sovereignty, environmental stewardship. His creative practice includes public art installations, knowledge-sharing workshops, paintings, zines, beekeeping, and agriculture. He's the director and founder of the art and ecology nonprofit, the Northside Workshop, and a lecturer at the Sam Fox School here at WashU. He holds a BFA from the Kansas City Art Institute and an MFA from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and Juan lives here in St. Louis. Ellie Irons and Anne Percoco are co-collaborators who take an eco-social approach to art making, emphasizing plant-human entanglement. With their ongoing Next Epoch seed library, they share a commitment to, as they state, relearning relationships with weedy plants through the lens of reciprocity rather than animosity. The project also consists of walks, workshops, discussions, and open access curriculum, deep time storage experiments, and other activities. Irons studied art and environmental science at Scripps College and completed an MFA at Hunter College and a PhD in arts practice at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute with a focus on public fieldwork, urban ecology, and socially engaged art. She lives in Troy, New York. Percoco earned a BA from Drew University and an MFA from Rutgers Mason Gross School of the Arts, and she lives in Jersey City, New Jersey. And lastly, before I hand things over, I'd like to reiterate Sabina's thanks to all of our supporters and to thank all of the incredible artists for being here and for collaborating with us on this exhibition. And I also want to give a shout out to our entire team at the Kemper for their incredibly hard work over the course of the installation and for their dedication to making this exhibition a reality and for just being all around wonderful colleagues. And with that, sorry, I'll hand it over.
Thank you so much, Meredith and Sabina, for starting us off, and welcome everybody. It's really great to see you this evening, even though it's so cold outside. It's really great to see that you've come out in great numbers. And I will give it, over to Carolina right away, who's going to give us a brief introduction into her practice.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thanks, Meredith and Svea, for putting together this show, and to my colleagues who are on the panel. It's great to be among you. Thank you to the Kemper for the invitation. My name is Carolina Caycedo. I'm a Colombian visual artist. I live in Los Angeles. The work you will see in the show is called Ñañay Kukuli, Soambawi Venak, and Kikukum, which means, or the three different languages, original languages from the continent, from the American continent. And means sister purple corn, sister squash, and sister brown tepary bean in Peruvian Quechua, in Tohono O'odham language, and in Maya Yucateco from the Yucatan Peninsula, where the seeds are coming from. So they are representing the three sisters. It's an agricultural technique that started here in the northeast part of the continent and spread all over the Americas. Corn, squash, and beans are a crop that when you grow together, support each other. They're known traditionally as the three sisters. And they're cradled in these yuta bags. And I probably can speak more when we open the conversation, but I want to share quickly works that precede this piece that actually was co-commissioned by the Kemper. This is a piece called My Feminine Lineage of Environmental Struggle. It's a collection of 140 plus portraits, like line portraits, of women environmentalists across the world who are land protectors, water protectors, seed custodians. Some of them have been killed because of their activism. Some of them are harassed legally. That's something that happens very much here in the United States. And a little bit, I wanted to show this piece. Let me show here you see Máxima Cunha from Peru. You see Berta Cáceres and her daughter. And you see people from Colombia, from India, Vandana Shiva, who is also a big protector of seeds and big champion of seeds. Just to talk about how women have been traditionally the knowledge keepers and the seed keepers around the world, right? And also how it's women who today are leading and spearheading water and land protection, who are keeping the gardens, who are keeping the fire alive. And the fact that the seed exhibition or the seed piece that I have here are called the Three Sisters, let's say, though they have this longer name, speaks also about this feminine genealogies, continental, worldwide, that for me it's important to kind of mark and highlight in my work. This is a recent piece that I did last year, very much contemporary to the Three Sisters that is here. It's called Life at the Center, and it consists of these 4 platforms, each facing north, south, west, east, also representing the 4 elements and the 4 seasons. And this was done in Los Angeles. I worked with a seed custodian. She called herself a seed doula, Asita Banu. She runs a community pantry garden in Westchester in Los Angeles. And we put together, I don't know, more than 1,000 seeds. I think it's kind of a seed library, but in a different form. There are seeds that are native to LA, but there are seeds that I grew in my garden, like purple corn, like the one that is in sculpture form here. So it talks about how seeds also have, don't know about borders. And they have crisscrossed this continent, and we have carried them through our migration since time immemorial, up and down this continent. So seeds connect us, women connect us. The work we're doing is related from the tip of the South America to the tip of North America. I think my work is a lot about that.
Thank you so much. I think that has given us a great, insight, especially for those of you who have not had the opportunity yet. And I think you'll find the work really striking in the exhibition. And Juan, if you can also give us a brief, overview of the work that you have in the exhibition, but also how it relates to your broader practice. You don't have to point. You don't have to point. It's just like it takes a little moment.
Well, thanks, everybody. It's a pleasure to be up here. It's good to see everybody. Thank you so much for everybody at the Kemper, my colleagues. It's been a really amazing experience. I'm going to talk a little bit about my work, which is a little slightly complicated, but we'll get through this.
5 minutes.
5 minutes, we'll get through this. I run a garden at the Northside Workshop, my nonprofit, and over the pandemic, it was actually part of Con Republic. We initiated a new garden plan, which embraced and supported native bees and native plants. So this is our native bee sanctuary. So our garden is a teaching garden. It's a chemical-free garden that really supports native bees and native plants. In addition to the garden, we have these experiential workshops. So this piece right here was part of a program. We were kind of decolonizing the hive. Honeybees are not from the Americas. They have a high annual death rate. But they're not endangered, where native bees are endangered, and they pollinate over 80% of all plant life. So the mission is to really educate and kind of get this knowledge out about how to support native bees and the mutual benefits that kind of happen. Year 2 of this is when we started to really think about the local history of St. Louis in connection with Cahokia Mounds and the indigenous history that we have, and that needs more support and knowledge. And so year 2 was kind of decolonizing the garden. I'm a member of the STL Indigenous Working Group, where I've worked with several community members. And I met a colleague, a friend, Rico Rose, who's an indigenous member here, who is also a holoculturist. And they gave a presentation on the history of gardens which was very insightful, and it kind of helped me kind of advance this narrative of how we can look at gardens, look at how we think a garden is, and kind of, create gardens in a way that supports and embraces their nature of existing. So this is a combination of our workshops and some of our knowledge sharing zines. And what you're going to see in the exhibition here, there's going to be a video that shows the workshop and the zines that were associated with the Decolonize the Garden projects. And also in the bookstore, there is a free copy of the zine. I recommend everyone grabbing. The zine was a collaboration with me and my colleague, Rico Rose. It's their words, and we kind of formatted it. So outside of the nonprofit, my studio practice, I create these survival blanket installations. And this is really has something to do with my background, my Peruvian background. And in Peru, you have all these sacred sites called huacas. And usually huacas have stewards that take care of them. And they also can talk to them, and the huacas talk to the stewards. And the stewards kind of take that information and kind of share it with community members. So sometimes that steward has to travel, and they take a bundle, which is referred to as a mesa or a tabletop. And it might be a rock from that area, or some water, or some kind of symbol. And so this, the garden here in St. Louis is my huaca. And my socially engaged practice, which involves parts of, it might be a defunct garden tool, definitely some beekeeping equipment, but then there's also artifacts from my own personal history. And usually there's a video that shows the socially engaged projects. So you're going to see the survival blanket associated with the Decolonize the Garden project.
Great, thank you so much. And so the last project, so these are of course all three new commissions that we have, invited for this exhibition, and the last one is by Anne Percoco and Ellie Irons. And
Hi, I'm Anne Percoco. This is Ellie Irons, and we are the next Epoch Seed Library. And so this is the one version of the structure in the gallery. And when we are doing a project in a particular location, we go and find sites that have been disturbed by humans. These could be Superfund sites, vacant lots, street verges, a crack in a sidewalk. Basically anywhere in a city has been impacted by humans, so it's all fair game. And we collect seeds from weeds that are growing spontaneously, that have not been planted, that are thriving despite the difficult environmental conditions that we've thrown at them. And so then we collect the seeds, we package them up into seed packets, and we make them available for the public to take. Just as in this show, you're welcome and encouraged to take a seed packet home with you. Here you go. Oh, maybe I'll advance the slide.
Sure, let's see what comes next. So, as Anne said, we've done this project in various locations, and we always make a special collection. And we were so well supported in this journey to St. Louis. So we're both guests here on multiple levels, and we were able to connect with community members, including Juan, who showed us around Northside Workshop, and we went out to the Cahokia Mounds with Natalie Mueller, a professor in paleobotany, who taught us about the histories there, and we were able to visit a borrow pit, which is the soil being scooped out and mounded up into the mounds, and found that, 1,500 years later, that human disturbance of the mound being lifted and piled up is still present. So that's our most ancient disturbed site that we've collected from. You want to click it? Yeah, so I think that we'll get into this more. We think a lot about human relationships to weedy plants and our tendency to have animosity and our interest in building solidarity with them as companions for journeying through climate chaos. And we do a lot of hands-on workshops as an eco-social practice. This is making a deep time seed burial. You'll see some vessels in the exhibition that relate to that. So we work with people to think about their hopes and fears for the future, then bury long-lived seeds. And we also have an ongoing lawn disruption project called the Lawn Redisturbance Laboratory, where we create a wound in the soil collaboratively together that is a redisturbance because a lawn is already a disturbance. And then we see what sleeping seeds will spring into a sculptural format that we create for them to fill. And I don't know if that's 3 minutes, but I think I will let it go right there.
Thank you so much. And I mean, that's really just the start, right? Because we asked all of them to give you at least kind of a brief introduction into their practice. And as you heard from all 4 artists who are, with us today, they really work with communities, they work in gardens, they work in the fields. So all of you are really engaged, with the outside world. But the work that you're showing here in the gallery is in the end still in a pretty standard white cube setting. I think we can say that. And so I want to start us out with the question of what does that actually mean? So what kind of process do you have to go through in order to bring this kind of research-based field work, this community work into the gallery? And what are some of the considerations that you think about as you find the appropriate form for that kind of museum setting? And also maybe what are some of the different experiences that you think, you can have by being out in nature, by being out in these communities, in these gardens, both human and more than human, but also what does the museum as a space actually offer you? And it really is an invitation to all 4 of you, all 3 projects, to speak to that. So whoever would like to go first? We stay in the order in which we started, so
Not fair. But I approach institutions as, and moreover this one that's embedded in an academic setting where students' knowledge is being exchanged and produced as a place to do that, to exchange knowledge, first and foremost. And as a place that is somehow safe, though we know that the museum is colonial in its kind of foundation and structure, still somehow safe to talk about the most important and present issues of our society today. And that's how I approach institutions. And sometimes it's easier, sometimes you're pushing harder, depending on the institution and the allies you encounter within that institution. And it's hard. For example, I always say I have 2 parallel practices. One that fits in an institution, like the seeds that come out of collaborating with a seed dash. She comes, we work together, we collaborate, like the seed platforms you saw, and out of that, and thinking about the 3 sisters, that allows me to create this more studio-based sculptural practice, for example. But other stuff that I do with community, they never touch the inside of the white cube, or for me there's no interest in trying to translate that to the white cube or to a white cube format. That doesn't mean that those 2 practices are not connected, and so those are the considerations I take. Some work is with the community, for the community, and should stay there, and I don't see the use, because then you're kind of extracting or following some sort of extractive practice. But it's a fine line. And it's kind of a case-to-case basis, I would say. There's not a rule or oh, this is the way it happens.
So maybe I can ask you a question specifically about your work in the exhibition, because you've said in previous interviews that you're very, critical of the Eurocentric landscape tradition because it really keeps viewers at a distance. And, we are here, there's nature, I can contemplate it, but I'm really not in nature, I'm not really with nature. And so if you, kind of describing your sculpture here, how do you think you kind of, address that or break through this kind of landscape tradition, and how does your sculpture work as a sculpture to give viewers that experience of being with nature?
Yes, for me in the last years I found that portraiture versus landscape as a kind of traditional format that for us who have passed through an academic formation of the arts, that's kind of the two main formats that we are taught. The landscape, mostly to represent nature, and portrait to represent other humans. And what you said, landscape, I found that continues and kind of asserts the colonial gaze, right? Because, as you said, it puts us as observers when we're not observers, we're part of the natural relationships that happen in any ecosystem, urban or rural or whatever ecosystem. We're certainly not the center of those relationships like Anthropocene wants to make us believe, but we're an important part, right? And portraiture has become a more useful and friendly format, if you want to say it that way for me, in order to understand that seeds, in this case, rivers, plants, are political beings that have the capacity to change the course of events the same that we have. They have agency. And we all know it. You know it here with the flood-ins, with the extreme heat. We know that if there's a reciprocal relationship with a seed, that little container of information can make a world. And then that can return the favor of taking care of us after. So portraiture has become definitely a kind of a practice that allows me also to develop a relationship, in this case with Nyanyay Kukuli, Sister Purple Corn, and Soam Bawi Vinag, Sister Brown Tepary Bean, and Ki Kukum. So for me, they are portraits of these particular seeds. Like how I got to make the seeds is that I chose 3 seeds, one from Peru, from South America, one from the southwest, the Tohono O'odham territory in Arizona, and then one from the Yucatan Peninsula and Maya Yucateco territory. And we 3D scan them and then render them in wood. Initially, I wanted to actually name each seed after a land and water protector from these sites. I sought permission to include their names, and then I decided not to do that and decided to actually include the language, the original language of these women. I still think it's a portrait, and for me, each of these seeds is associated with a particular woman that I had a conversation with and that helped me select the seed, actually. But that's kind of the background story that I'm sharing today, and sometimes not everything has to be visible to the public, and that's kind of the decision-making and the editing that as an artist you have to do, too. So for me, these are portraits of these 3 seeds. The original ones are there on my desk. I have them. And you have the big sisters, the 3 big sisters here. I would say that.
Yeah, wonderful. And I mean, if I can just briefly add to that, the way Carolina has talked about this work before is that, like, as you step into the middle of these, 3 seats, you're really feeling hugged by them, and they're hugged by the jute bags in which they sit. So there is really also this very, physical dimension to them.
Yeah,
so,
the decision of hanging them and making them at that side is kind of a human torso size, so is that you feel surrounded and feel kind of almost a necessity to hug them. Yeah. Because that's what they do, and they're hugging you too.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. And Juan, also, like, staying with this question of, I think in your case, it's, you already talked about it, how, the work in the exhibition is kind of the portable garden, right? But still, how does it connect? Like, how do you bring, this kind of field work, this community work into the museum space? And, what are the different spaces? What do they allow you to do?
Well, I talk to my students a lot about how the creative process is time-based. You have a beginning, middle, and end. And my social practice, usually, at this point, it takes a year for some of these things to happen, or 2 years. So the garden has taught me to think in a cycle, a seasonal cycle. And when you are working with any type of community, human or non-human, it takes time. You can't rush anything. And there's a certain kind of challenge to that I particularly enjoy. They're all organic relationships working with like-minded people. Some are artists, some are non-artists, and then, figuring out a way where we can co-create together and, support each other. Our mission at Northside is that the garden's there for self-expression, environmental stewardship, and community building. And for me, the community building aspect is not just for, big community with a capital C, but it's for me. Like I need to feel connected. I need to feel. I need to meet new people that think different than me and be exposed to that. Just like how I need to meet a new plant, and the plant's going to show me its life cycle, or a pollinator that's going to show me. And so it's a very, I like being alone and creating artwork, but it's a back and forth. I have to be with people. I have to be alone and think and reflect. I have to be alone in my garden, and then I have to have people in the garden. So it's kind of like a back and forth. But all these things during a social practice project, at the root of my practice, I'm a drawer. I draw a lot. I create a lot. I get attached to certain objects. I kind of view, over time, objects take on different meanings. And I kind of hang out with them and move them around in my studio. So I spend a long time with objects and drawings and video footage and photographs. I accumulate a lot of kind of artwork. And so survival blankets are really, all of a sudden it's like a time capsule of like a year and a half of my own experience on that blanket.
And you were talking yesterday, I think, about like the different elements on these blankets almost as protagonists, right? Mm-hmm. And so they all have their stories, and they form their own communities, and there's a dynamic between them.
Right. And some stay on the blanket, some get taken off. New objects are made, so exhibitions are really help me kind of reflect on the actual social engagement over those years, and so for me, it's kind of the beginning, middle, and end. This repeats just like the seasons. So the exhibition is kind of like a closing of a chapter, and then the next season we're going to try to go deeper on. Maybe we'll go deeper into water. Or for this project, we went deeper into seeds. So. Which is something that, I was all about plants, all about pollinators, and seeds was really like, so the workshop was also metaphorically about like planting a mind or an idea seed, changing people's perspectives.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I also want to move us a little bit on thematically, so maybe you can combine your answer in a way. Because, I know we've talked a lot about the different kinds of spaces for community and education, and, you've shown your works definitely in very different kind of spaces, right? Like in public libraries, and in universities, in art contexts, and for us, with this exhibition, and I also know, for everyone here on this panel, this is really like the work and the exhibition is about addressing the climate crisis and, finding models of survival. And so if you could speak, more explicitly than you have already even, how the Next Epoch Seed Library, the name itself is already so evocative, right? So there is a Next Epoch, and what is that, and why is that seed library actually maybe helping us to hopefully survive? Yeah. So.
Sure. I think it operates on many levels, and please jump in if you have something to add. On a grand scale, we maybe touched on this a little bit already, but reducing human alienation and kind of amnesia in contemporary Western urban society around our connection to living beings, and stepping into the landscape painting and understanding that we're shaping it and that we're not outside of it. A really accessible way to do that is to connect with the weedy species growing out of your sidewalk crack and touch the seeds and hold a living being in your hand. And if we're going back to the question before, I think for us, the transition from the field to the studio to the exhibition is then back out of the exhibition, and it's that we take the living being, somebody said to us, the promise held in the seed. Was it you, Charlie, who's in the room last night? And it passes from the hands of the people who collected, often in a community setting. Kids love to seed collect, so when we can do it with kids. And then it passes into our studio. Sometimes that also is a collaborative project. Carmen maybe is in the audience, and it's a local student who helped us package seeds, passes into the exhibition space, and then hopefully is taken again. And all along the way, the liveliness of the seed is maintained. And we hope that we can communicate that this being that is so often objectified under extractive capitalism is alive and
But
and
why are they so resilient? And so why is it so interesting to look at them if we really want to find a model, for survival?
Do you want to jump in, Anne?
Sure.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So our project foregrounds and welcomes adaptation, and cities especially are laboratories for our climate futures because of the urban heat island effect. Cities are 2 or 3 degrees warmer, right, than the landscape around it. So it's really gives plants and really any species a chance to sort of adapt a little bit ahead of where the rest of the earth is, and then hopefully the rest of the earth can benefit from those adaptations. And in terms of models for survival against climate collapse, one story that we found inspiring was happened or heard about from the New Jersey Meadowlands near where I live, and that's basically like a marsh, and it's and the in quote unquote invasive species there that's kind of taking over is called Phragmites, and taking over against above the native reed. And so basically, I read this article by Judith Weiss, a scientist, who said that with sea level rise, the marsh, which is really important ecologically for lots of different species, including humans, because it protects against storm surges, is when the sea level rises, what happens to the marsh? If the marsh is to survive, it has 2 options. One is to increase the elevation, and the other option is to move inland. And in New Jersey, everything's built up. Like, inland is a city, a town, like an industrial area. It cannot move inland. Like, there are buildings there. So the only option is to increase in elevation. And this article by Judith Weiss found that the native species Spartina it's not capable of growing at that fast a rate, but Phragmites is. So even though there have been great efforts to curb the spread of Phragmites, from spreading poison to all sorts of grand scale efforts to keep Phragmites at bay, she's saying that maybe we need to make room for Phragmites in our heads, that without Phragmites, we might not even have a marsh there in the future. So that's one story that we take inspiration from, where the species that in this context is called invasive has some valuable qualities that we may need.
Yeah, and I mean,
Can I-
yeah, absolutely, please.
And one of the teachings, I think we'll respond to that question. One of the teachings that I received from doing the research for the 3 sisters was the teaching of the tepary bean. So the tepary bean that's in the room, it's not a common bean. It's a bean, but common bean is Phaseus vulgaris, and this tepary bean is Phaseus actualifolus. The tepary bean has been taken care of by the Southwest peoples for over 10,000 years. And it's a bean that thrives in the desert. It's a bean that thrives in dry conditions. You're not in a dry place here, but where I live in California, it's quite dry, and all the Southwest and other parts of the continent can be quite dry. So I don't know how many people here knew about the tepary bean, but it's not very common, and though it's been among us for 10,000 years, right? And it may be one of these beans or seeds or crops that may help people who are in dry conditions where it's more difficult to find water to grow crops like corn, for example, right? Because there's already existence. So it's really beautiful when Asita, my collaborator for the platforms, talks about beans. She says that beans reactivate our memory. We're kind of disconnected of the accumulated knowledge that we have in our bodies, and seeds definitely what you say when people touch them, right? It's a reconnection, but it reconnects us with the environmental memory that we carry with us, the accumulated memories from our ancestors, the embodied memory and knowledge that we carry, not the one that is taught in settings like this academia, but the one that was passed through generations and that we still have in our bodies. It has to do with our memory muscle. And a lot of embodied knowledge has to do with gestures of caring, too. Of caring for the seeds, of caring for the plants, of caring for our kids, for our elders, for our surroundings. So I think also seeds carry that, like it reminds us that care is an important tool for survival and for resilience. And also that we're thinking about, or at least how I am trying to think about how to face climate crisis, I try to think and align myself with processes of just transition and just energy transition, which is a transition where everyone is getting decarbonized at the same time without collateral damages over more particular, right? What we're seeing today is a decarbonization of the North at expense of the South. But we forget that energy is food. We think still, when we name energy or we think about energy transitions, we are still sticking to electrical matrix or electrical frameworks, but we forget that energy is our first and foremost food. If we don't have access to good food, our brains and our bodies don't function well. We get sick, right? So how important is to think food as energy, and also how can we change our relationship to food production, food consumption, and distribution, especially in a place like here, the Midwest, where big ag is so important, economically. It's going to be hard, but this is the place to have these conversations, right? This is where
Absolutely. And I was actually going to ask you next about how the seed, really stands as energy for you. So you already answered that. Wonderful. But now that we're already on the topic of St. Louis, right? You have collected here in St. Louis. Juan, you work here. So, maybe really kind of brief from all of you, but really what does it mean to respond to the condition of St. Louis, and what is on the one hand very specific to St. Louis, but also how is that very situated experience of being in St. Louis and addressing these concerns in St. Louis still tie into these really planetary global concerns that Carolina was just talking about in terms of really energy, environmental justice, and how it really connects to these very, very big and pressing issues. So, sorry, big question with a short answer.
Well, this is my. That's a tough question. St. Louis is my home, so I'm gonna fight for it. That's a tough question there.
No, but I think that already says it, right?
Yeah,
because there's the care, but there's also the fight, there's the struggle,
for sure.
and there's the connection to it. And so you've spent most of your life here, right? And
definitely.
And Ellie, you came in for just a week, but you also still, found plants and seeds that are very much connected to the different stories here, right? So do you have an example of one thing that you found that kind of tells the story of St. Louis, or, of these kinds of challenges?
Do you want to talk about the burn range? Sure. Yeah, it's great.
So one of the sites that we visited, or actually my friend Alan took me to the Compton Reservoir because he knew that we liked weedy landscapes, and that's why we were there. So we walked around it, And it was great, collected some seeds, and then we got down to the bottom of the stairs, and I looked across the street, and there was this really grand building. It looked like it had been, like there was a fire there, and there were giant weeds growing up from the stairs. I was like, I would like to go there. But it was dusk, it was getting dark, so we just went up the stairs. I got a plant, and I took it back to where we were staying. And Ellie said, that's American burnweed. So, you know, the name of the plant, burnweed, connects to the history of that site, a fire. So what's going on here? So American burnweed is a plant that is adapted to disturbance, specifically fire disturbances. And there are other plants that are adapted to different kinds of disturbance, but fire is really good for burnweed because it clears away competitors. It adds both phosphorus and potassium to the soil, which is really good for plants. It provides nutrients, and it typically creates these corridors of open space where gusts of wind can blow through. And if you're a plant like burnweed, which has fluffy, like dandelion seeds that float in the air, then big gusts of wind are great because they carry your seeds far and wide. But also, the plant burnweed is really good for sites where there have been fire because being a disturbance-adapted plant, it's an early succession plant, which means that not much can survive there right away after the fire, after the disturbance, but burnweed can. So it goes in and starts growing, and then, you know, plants from one season die and create like different kinds of soil on the ground, and then kind of like, you know, changes how the soil is held with the roots, and it kind of makes the landscape more habitable so that other species can then move in. And that process of plants making a landscape more habitable for other species, including humans, it's basically like healing the land. And this is what these kind of, you know, a lot of the species that we're interested in are disturbance adapted, and these are like their superpowers. And, you know, as humans, we're creating a lot of disturbances in the landscape, so we really need these kinds of plants.
Thank you. I think that's beautiful. Like, there are superpowers to them, and I mean, I have so many more questions, but I mean, I think at least, you know, we've touched upon survival, we've touched upon like artistic form giving, we've spoken a little bit about collaboration, and we've really, I think, you know, seen how seeds are so small but so mighty, and they are energy, and they are connected to histories, and they have, you know, the promise and potential to connect us, but there's also real responsibility, care, and really this demand for reciprocity. And you've been listening to us for almost an hour now, and to at least, you know, have some chance for dialogue, you know, I would like to open up for questions now. So if you do have a question, please, you know, raise your hand, and we'll be happy to pass the microphone to you. And I know that all of us here in the front are eager to hear from you, even if right now you feel a little shy. Everyone's still here for the opening. You can come up to them, but it would be amazing if we had some questions for the audience, because I know all of the artists are really interested in dialogue. So if anyone has a question. Mm-hmm. So, sorry.
Hello. I have a question kind of about the use of glyphosate in terms of treating what are deemed invasive species, especially in cities, and how that can leach into other aspects of life. Can any of you speak to how to live with these types of plants without necessarily killing them or using practices that can affect other species in the area?
So right now we only have one microphone, so we have to pass it on to whoever wants to speak. But
someone else wants to jump in. Yeah, I mean, I think we need a monumental shift in our expectations around how landscapes appear. So we work a lot when we're dealing with lawn lab and disrupting lawn ecosystems with cues to care, because people want to see that the landscape is cared for, it's tended, but unfortunately, under this current Western colonial and also pretty much a monoculture.
So Carolina was saying patriarchal. You're missing
Patriarchal also, thank you. The lawn serves to roll out a green carpet and offset the architecture, basically, and create a vista, right? And that is not ecology. Ecology is not a view, and it is messy, and it's entangled, it grows, it moves, it changes, it's not, it's diverse. And you can, there's a purpose to lawns. We have reason, where we might want a green vista to walk on and play and roll around and have a picnic. But many, many plants can live in a lawn without changing its lawnness. And certainly you can even have meadows that are seasonally mowed. How about a horse-drawn mower? They have those in Sweden, where they mow their lawns, a couple times a year, their meadows a couple times a year with a, for decarbonizing and being in relationship with animals. But it really, I think it is the monumental cultural shift. And if you have anything to add, but yeah, or Juan, yeah. And obviously the poison is moving around, we know that.
So the zine that I collaborated with Rico actually talks about the history of lawns, which anybody that comes to the north side, the first question is, what do I do with the weeds, And I'm like, man, there's so much anxiety, like so much pressure on knowing like all of it, So learning about plants is an ongoing life process, right? And you just take one step at a time. But with Rico's presentation, the history of lawns is just like insane, and you're basically giving yourself a bunch of chores. My back is, probably permanently damaged for the first couple of years of working at Northside, because we were just like trying to control everything. And long story short is that when you embrace the nature of nature, like things get really fun right away. So the decline of the garden is probably one of the most joyful experiences I ever went through. And my back loves me for it. And so much, let's just say, I sometimes I say the word magic, like so much magic comes from that. Lots of, when you plant native plants, you get native pollinators. They come in all shapes and sizes. Then, like, the birds come, and, you go back into your backyard, there's, like, you are connected, and it's pretty phenomenal. So the thing is that you embrace the weeds. You might pull some here and there, but the weeds, is not a category. It's a made-up category, and when you... I guess the best way is to look up the weed and just get to know it. The first plant that we were kind of dealing with is we had a big drought, and the chicory, which is a big weed, actually was the only thing that was blooming. It's drought tolerant, and they don't even like good soil. They want like rocky, gritty, and that's what was feeding all the pollinators. So for the first couple of years, we honored the chicory plant and just like left it. And we love that little blue little flower. And so it's really about getting to know it, right? Getting to know the profile. And the common thing is you hear up here is that we're talking about plants like they're our friends, and they talk to us, and they do.
I think that's also something that unites all of you, right? To really like have this mutual address, to have this idea of like kinship, ancestors, connection. But Carolina,
And
you also want to speak to that?
plants that we categorize as weeds actually are medicinal. Like chicory has medicinal powers, and what I found, or at least it happened to me, that some of the weeds that sprouted have helped me with my allergies. So sometimes when a weed is insisting and like coming into your life and bothering you, maybe you should pay attention, because maybe it's trying to tell you something exactly, or like help you with some ailment you have. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So maybe we have time for one more question if there is another question from you. Yeah. Thank you.
I had a question for Carolina specifically, and you'll have to forgive me because I'm just basing this on the photo. I haven't seen your piece, but from what I understand about the Three Sisters Garden, they kind of grow on top of each other and support each other in that growth. And the way that you have it presented here, they seem more isolated. And I know you talked about kind of, you know, the person inserting themselves and being in conversation, but I'm wondering about your decision to kind of isolate them.
Well, here they're in the seed form. If you don't put the seeds together in the ground, they will never come together. So you have to, you know, this is just their first stage, the seed form. So yeah, you have to put them together so that they can support each other. That has to have that human interaction. So it's about that also to kind of remind that we have had a historical relationship with these three little kernel seeds, beans, and that when we put them together, then they can support each other, and then they can support us too. And sometimes you have other, you know, like chiles and quinoa in South America is grown with the Three Sisters. So like the milpa or the conuco or like the garden or the huerto. You know, there's more sisters and brothers, and you know, but these are the core ones. But I don't think they're isolated, actually. I think they are cradled in the baskets. They're ready to be put together. They're just waiting for us to take care of them.
I think that's a beautiful way of ending it, because I think that's something that we've realized working on this exhibition, that seeds really are full of potential because they're in the stage of becoming. They're not yet, but then they're also meanwhile, and they're the past, present, and future, but not in a chronological understanding, but really in the simultaneity. And I think it's really important to hold on to this potential, also to the speculative dimension, to modes of resilience, reciprocity, care. And I want to thank all four of you for being here tonight with us. I want to thank all of you for coming, and I hope you'll enjoy the exhibition. I hope you'll learn from it, and I hope it will really spark a lot of conversations, and then also, you know, might inspire some practices of how to relate differently and with each other, but also with everything that we're part of and that surrounds us. So thank you very, very much, and yeah, wonderful.